start by describing the pins that we're going to use for this project. This project is using a web client that's communicating with our board using Bluetooth Low Energy. Our board is pulling humidity and temperature from the sensor SHT35 over I2C. The Bluetooth stack contains three different parts. The server can contain one or more services, and each service can contain one or more characteristics. Let's start by analyzing the code that's getting uploaded to our microcontroller. It's written on MicroPython, and if we open the SHT35 library, here we can see that we are only writing and reading to a specific address, and once we read that information, we're converting that to humidity and to temperature. If we jump to main.py, here is the main code that's getting also uploaded to our board. I created an exact copy called comments.py. Here I have the exact same code but with comments. We start by just importing time, UJSON, I2C libraries, analog to digital, our Bluetooth, and our SHT35 library. On line 12, we have a global variable for letting our code known when we have a client connected to our Bluetooth server. Here we have a couple of callback functions. Line 40, that's the pin that we are going to use for reading the battery. 43, we're turning off the heartbeat from the Pycom board. Line 46, we're starting our library for the sensor. 49, we're setting our Bluetooth advertisement name as low-pi, and we're setting our service unique identifier as 12345. On line 56, we're setting up our first callback for our Bluetooth server. We're specifying that we want to trigger our callback on two different conditions. Once when a client is connected, and once if the client is getting disconnected. Our callback is quite simple. We're just updating our global variable with true or false to let ourselves know when we have someone connected. Line 61 is that we want to start advertising that name over Bluetooth. Line 65, we want to add a service to our server, and we want to call that service 12345. We want to set that service as primary. We want to have two different characteristics, and we want to start using that service right away. On line 70, we are defining our first characteristic for our service, primary service. We want to call our first characteristic 54321, and we're also describing in the properties section that we want to broadcast data, and we want to also notify when we are changing the data from our characteristic, or when we're changing values, and we're also initializing that value with a string JSON, an empty JSON string. Line 73, we're defining our second characteristic. Here we're just setting in the properties that we only want to use this characteristic for writing to the sensor, and here we're just setting our value as an hexadecimal of 255,0000. For our characteristic number 2, we're having a callback. That callback is when someone writes data to our server, and we're just listening for our write event, and we're just converting that byte array data to an int, and we're just setting that to our RGB LED. So in other words, we're just changing the LED light dynamically when we're writing that characteristic. At the bottom, we only have a infinite loop. Here we're just reading the sensor data every 10 seconds. We're dumping that data into a JSON object. And if someone is connected, we're just setting the value of our characteristic to that string. If we jump to the portal side, it's extremely simple. It's a very simple HTML file, and we have one script.js file and one style CSS. But if we look at the index HTML file, we only have a handful of buttons that are uniquely represented by different IDs. And we also have an input type color, so a color picker. And then we have different divs for inserting our voltage, Celsius, and humidity values. And at the bottom, we also have our box for our log. If we open our script file, at the top we just have a couple of global variables. We're also defining our decoder. So when we are receiving a byte array, we're decoding that byte array to an UTF-8 characters. On load, we are just attaching different event listeners, clicks, and also on change for the different buttons and inputs that we have. Let's make space and start explaining one by one. Let's start with the first callback, or I'm sorry, the first event listener, request device. Request device, here we're basically asking the browser to open or to search for available Bluetooth devices. And here on the filter, we're just letting our browser know that, okay, I also want to allow the following services that are not part of the standard service catalog. Then we are connecting to our server on line 61. Line 65, once we are connected, we're getting our primary service. Then we're getting the characteristics for each service. So we are basically just getting those characteristics. Then let's jump to a start notification callback. Here we have that we are having an event listener on characteristic value change. So when our server is pushing new data to that characteristic, we're basically decoding that string and we're just printing those values or adding those values to our divs. Then what we have, this is just when we are adding the values to our divs, render log, or we're just rendering that list. Function to disconnect from the server. And at the bottom we have our function to convert our X string to a byte array of RGB values. Let's see how the application looks in motion. So we have our website. Let's click on connect. That will open the list of available Bluetooth devices. Let's connect to our LowPi. That's the name that we define. Click on pair. Now let's click on notifications. So we want to start listening for those notifications changes. And we will see that the log will start to populate, and on the middle we have the current value for the voltage, temperature, and humidity. Let's click on the color picker, and that change will change the value or the color of the RGB LED.